MAGA Fox News hosts are celebrating the fact that the polls are tightening between Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, which forces liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov to pour a bit of cold water on their premature victory lap with one key brutal fact check. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, got a couple of clips to show you here, but as a reminder, I'm leaving town this weekend to go to Las Vegas, Nevada to canvass, door knock, and try to get out the vote with liberal streamer Destiny and his community. The data show that this election is going to be very close unless something miraculous happens, so we should not be complacent. And if you're an eligible voter, I encourage you, strongly encourage you, given the consequences, given the implications, to please make a plan to get out and vote if you have not already. With that in mind, the polls are tightening between these two candidates. And in one particular area, specifically, Vice President Harris is at a major disadvantage with one specific demographic, and that is men, okay? And consequently, all right-wing and centrist news media like to focus on that. Oh, why is Harris just struggling with men? But Jessica Tarlov, liberal Fox News commentator, has a bit of a fact check for people about the other side of that equation.
He is playing golf with Bryson DeChambeau and the rest of them. I mean, the Nelk boys on the plane. I mean, what is Kamala doing to get the male vote other than sending out Waltz, who gets a coach who gets booed at football games?
Well, if you want to play the booed game, there's plenty of footage of Donald Trump getting booed, and we'll see how it all
talk about Kamala and how she's getting men on her team.
I'm saying it has been an issue for the campaign.
Yeah, 100%. What is she doing?
She has an agenda to lift up all Americans, the opportunity economy. I can go through all of it, but we're not going to do as well with men as we should have. But there is a flip side to this coin. And the other side of that is that women don't like Donald Trump. And guess what? Women vote in bigger numbers than men do. There's this video circulating on social media of a conservative commentator interviewing 3 or 4 girls on a college campus about why they're voting for Kamala. And they're talking about reproductive health care. They're talking about having a right to have an abortion, if they want an abortion, if they end up needing an abortion, and he's mocking them. And you see in the comments, people mocking them. Mock at your own risk, because people take this issue very seriously. It's the reason that Kamala Harris is going to Houston tomorrow, not only to be with Beyonce. It better not be Leon Panetta. I just want Beyonce tomorrow. But she's going to talk about the abortion issue and what that looks like for people like Kate Cox. There's a story today out in Rolling Stone about a woman who found out at 5 months, she lives in Florida, that her child, the fetus had Potter syndrome and would not survive. They weren't able to give her an abortion, which was what was recommended by the doctor. She had to carry that fetus another 3.5 months to deliver it, only so it would die. You think that's okay?
Great. This is really good.
So, great fact check by Jessica Tarlov. Again, the other side of that coin that centrists and Republicans and MAGA never want to talk about. I mean, listen, if you want to criticize the Harris campaign for not doing enough to encourage the male vote, that is a perfectly legitimate criticism, because we should try to maximize our reach with as many cohorts as possible. And that's a significant vulnerability given that they are nearly 50% of the population. Fair enough. But given that women represent a majority of the population and women are more likely to vote than men, those are two even bigger reasons why centrist and even right-wing media should be discussing Trump's vulnerability there, because it increases the chances that he loses this election, which again, for all intents and purposes, is a coin flip. Before we get into more of the women dynamic, though, I do want to say it was reported earlier today that Vice President Harris would not be appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast as has been originally reported, that they were in talks. So I'm going to play this clip of Ian Sams on MSNBC talking with Chris Hayes about why that decision was made, and then we'll talk about that briefly.
Given the size of that audience, and given that a lot of the folks that Trump seems to be targeting might be listening to that.
Well, yeah, I think that the vice president's happy to go anywhere and any place to talk to a broad segment of the country. We talked with Rogan and his team about the podcast. Unfortunately, it isn't going to work out right now because of the scheduling of this period of the campaign. But, you know, she's taking her message to these huge platform audiences, even like Club Shay Shay, like you just talked about. She was able to sit down with Shannon Sharpe today. And so she's happy to go into these places and share her message. And I think that it's reaching people who aren't really invested in the political process. Donald Trump with Joe Rogan, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
It is, and I hope the thing is out before I fly to Vegas because it would be nice to cover it. Here's what I will say. It's great that Vice President Harris is going into these unorthodox alternative media spaces. I think that's great. In a coin flip election, and given that the general proposition reflected in the polls, obviously there are exceptions, but the general trend is the more people see of Harris, the more they are inclined to like her. Not overwhelmingly, but more often than not. It's the opposite with Trump. The more people see Trump, the higher his unfavorability is. So he's taking more of a gamble than she is by just being exposed. Obviously, Joe Rogan's going to be a softball interview because even though he has praised Kamala Harris for the rigor and the discipline of her campaign, he's just been ideologically predisposed towards Trump for years. So it's going to be a softball interview. In my opinion, not knowing the specifics, I think that the vice president should have been willing to reschedule things in order to accommodate. Like, I don't know what the scheduling conflict was, but I think they should have bent over backwards to try to get on Rogan's podcast, in my opinion. Obvious exceptions. Maybe they could come out and say, no, we had this major campaign event and we've done the math on this. And, it's the ground game is more important than a Joe Rogan appearance. Maybe that's true. These people aren't stupid. But just based on there were scheduling conflicts. I'm like, well, I hope you did everything in your power to circumvent those scheduling conflicts, even if it meant rescheduling other issues or other appearances, or send Governor Tim Walz. Send Tim Walz to Joe Rogan. Say, like, damn it, the vice president can't make it because she's already got these prior commitments. But you know what? We can get you Tim Walz. That would have been an excellent interview. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcast in the world, even though I think his political takes for the most part suck. So missed opportunity, and I hope we don't come to regret it. But again, having said that, the polls are close. And to the extent that there is a deficit in the gender gap between the two candidates, I think it's worse for Trump. We have two major polls out, Reuters Ipsos and the New York Times Siena. And the New York Times Siena shows a dead heat. That one has me a bit nervous, quite candidly. But Reuters Ipsos, let's talk about that. Republican Donald Trump has nearly erased Democrats' longstanding advantage among Hispanic men ahead of the November 5th presidential election, according to a new analysis of Reuters Ipsos. But Trump's gains have been offset by increased support for Harris among white women who favored him over Biden by 12 points in late 2020, but now only lean Republican by 3 points. The two candidates are locked in an exceptionally tight race, with Harris up only marginally, 46 to 43%. That's within the margin of error, but it shows that she's overall ahead. And again, her advantage with women is still there. And even to the extent that Trump is undercutting, Democratic support among Hispanic and Black voters, again, they are more likely than not inclined to vote Republican, according to the polls. But these are things that we have to take into consideration. Just doesn't seem like Trump is doing anything about his disadvantage with women. A couple of other things to talk about here. So the top 4 issues, according to the New York Times Siena poll, was immigration, the economy first, immigration, abortion, and democracy. Trump leads in 2, Harris leads in 2. The polls crosstabs are also really interesting because if you look at it, they would say, do you consider yourself Democrat, Republican, Independent? 32% of the respondents say Democrat, 33, so 1 percentage point more, say Independent, 30% say Republican, and 30% say Independent. So it's effectively a 3-way split. If you said if you're an independent, which do you lean more towards as of today? 45% say Democrat compared to 42% for Republican. So again, a 3 percentage point advantage. So it's really interesting. But if you look down at the social media diet, you're going to see that like conservative outlets like Fox News and conservative podcasts actually enjoy an advantage in terms of who these people consume for their news. So a couple of things here. When you look at the approval, Donald Trump has a favorability rating of 48% compared to 50%. Vice President Harris matches in the New York Times Siena poll, even though generally speaking and in the aggregate, her favorability is higher than Trump's. But in the New York Times Siena, it's basically 50-50. Again, the top 4 issues, the economy, abortion, immigration, democracy. Donald Trump handles, let's see, which he handled the most important. Kamala Harris enjoys a 46% advantage in terms of who do you think is handling the issue you think is most important. Trump leads by 3 percentage points. This is where it gets into specifics. The economy, Trump has a 52% advantage, but Vice President Harris has cut into that. They used to be a sizable double-digit advantage for Trump, and now it's only 7%. Okay, on abortion, she leads him by 15%. On immigration, he leads her again by double digits, 11%. But she cut into that. Again, it used to be like 16, 17%, and she's cut it by a third, nearly half. And then on democracy, she leads him by 6 percentage points. So on the top 4 major issues, according to this New York Times Siena poll, it's basically split. Again, that should make everybody nervous. It's a coin flip election. It's not guaranteed that he's going to win, but he very easily could. We cannot get complacent on this. She enjoys, again, a colossal advantage with a majority of the country in terms of the gender gap that's voting and more likely to vote. But all the other specifics being what they are, him enjoying, an advantage on the number one issue, which is the economy in the polling. Folks, we have to take this seriously. So again, if you're an eligible voter, make sure you're registered to vote. A lot of places have same-day registration. So if you're an eligible voter who's not registered, you still may be able to register to vote and actually vote on the same day. So please make a plan to do that. And I'll let you know how it goes in Las Vegas. So in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.